Testing, testing. How is that? It's probably noisy, but I guess I've turned it up really loud. Testing. Okay, great. You know, I didn't care about the quality. I only cared about the fact that it was cutting out. But yeah, the quality is a bonus. Unfortunately, I had to cannibalize my music room setup to get this working. So it's not a permanent solution, but that's fine. All right, so where were we? Right, I was looking at the MFD. Does the MFD not have an interactive map? No, it has hardware automap, but maybe it's just non-interactive. I don't know what else to look for. Is that the only thing in MFD Funk is this qual, which is quality setting or does it qualify? Not sure which. Map. It's just called map, not map. MFD map handler. Is in automap. Okay. Not a map, automap. Right. Great. Okay. So I think that's what's going on is automap is the mini-map version of the map. Probably. I don't know who this neither of us is. Don't know what their cross-section mode is. But okay, yeah, so that all makes sense. So automap bitmap rendering, full screen automap processing, and then automap.c is MFD mini map automap. So I am categorizing it as I go, so I guess we'll officially structure it that way. You just use double stars in this. And I'll just have to fill things back in as I think of them. As I come across them, I mean. I might be talking a little too quietly. Way less noisy than the previous hack. Oh, okay. It's a different kind of noise. This will be picking up all the every background noise and stuff. Like I actually had the window open and I closed it, which might actually be relevant too. But to what the change in sound quality. But all right, so that's enough detail though for this. So we skipped this. It's pretty. Oh, we skipped ammo MFD first. So yeah, that's just you can see how much ammo you have and. Handler is responsible for UI events, yeah. So, in case you were wondering what MFD stood for, so this is MFD, let's see. Oh, what's that for my copy paste buffer? Let's just put this in my copy paste buffer. should have support for reloading in here. Or is reload on a different screen? Ammo exposed. The exposed sounds like the Windows rendering style, so this would just be drawing it. Right through the gun types. Okay, so this is a screen that you bring up in the MFD that lists all the weapons. I believe. And the reload one is a different MFD. So I think that's what this would be. So there should be a loop over guns. Yep, there you go. Loop through the guns. Oops. And then they each have like 2 or 3 ammo types. So it might be a loop. It might not be. Yeah, there you go. Loop through the ammo types. Okay. So that's what that does. And then there was one more A function. Function starting with A, audio log. And that's pretty clear what that's going to be. So this commenting out could have been that the Mac port commented out the PC way of doing it and did it a different way. Like it's using QuickTime movies instead of some other thing. It looks like when you play an audio log, it would turn down the music in the original, and they may not do that in the new one. Wait, if KLC were a Mac port, why would he be doing this kind of thing? Unless they found bugs and fixed them. Oh, is KLC somebody on the programming team? I can't think of anyone. I had thought in the past these were Mac port things. Do you have any documentation system at LGS where you would actually write down how the whole thing is architected? No, I don't think there was anything like that. I think it was just in people's heads. But I mean, it's interesting because here you have a fair number of comments, which then I do wonder if that's because they're mostly KLC comments. It's not even the Looking Glass way. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, so I think this is the PC code here, and this is the Mac code. And I don't know why it's got those things. But so what this ought to do is turn down the rest of the audio or something, given that it does that. Curve all level. Oh, maybe that's just a global that's always true. It seems like they were good about commenting out, and no, audio log stop. Why would that? Oh, it stops an existing audio log because it's going to play a new one. I just don't see where it turns down unless they deleted that code instead of commenting it out. Maybe it's done somewhere else. Maybe something else that calls turns it down. But it's pretty clear what this does. Oh, I kind of need to put the file in audio log.c. Audio log.c. This was a DOS game, so I think the file names were all caps, like that was required by DOS. It's been so long I forget, but that sounds right. Bark. So barks are usually things spoken by NPCs, and we didn't have any NPCs in this, so I don't know what this would be. It's an MFD. I don't know what. Shodan barks. Why would you have the MFD involved in a bark? Well, so this is audio. In audio logs, you would play these. You would show their pictures, but so I don't know, are these emails? It's just, it doesn't seem like it would be. There must be some function I'm forgetting that the MFD had. Let's just grep that. MFD bark expose. But what text or audio comes from triggers? Oh, I guess Shodan, nice try, or whatever that Shodan, surprise, or whatever. I don't remember what they were specifically. But yeah, Shodan would spontaneously talk to you, I guess. So yeah, that was those, which are the traditional sense of barks. I guess we can put this in, consider it as part of audio, even if it's not strictly. And I guess we put it under MFD. Why am I the one doing this instead of you? Instead of Dirt Sahav doing this, given he's already figured this all out. It's probably a good enough description. Bio help. Well, there's the biometrics MFD. Is that what's considered help? Hey, look, this actually documents what an expose function is. Barret. Hand-coded margins. Help expose. So is this just the biorhythms display? What's the buttons? What's the help aspect of this? It's got its own cursor. Oh, I'm not complaining about you helping. I'm just like, why am I doing this if you've already done it? Like, literally. What is the interactivity here doing? It changes the mouse biohelp page. But this isn't checking button down. Oh, it is. If the button's down, burp, then we offset and we figure out where you're clicking, and if it's outside of an arrow, then we toggle this. So it's a screen that has like a little top left corner has something they're calling an arrow. And if you click outside the arrow, it toggles between two pages. And that should then affect what it draws or something. But it's still drawing the same thing. I don't see any dependency on biohelp here. Oh, there. Here's the arrow. Toggle on the side MFD what it should monitor? I don't remember that at all. Dude, I asked for System Shock 1. Stop showing me System Shock 2. I don't want the games at all. I guess nobody has bothered documenting this. Oh, it's a hardware attachment. Maybe I never used it. No screenshots? Maybe it's this. Like this display up here is the biorhythms thing I was talking about, but it's presumably not that. I don't think anybody has a screenshot of it. I'd have to find like a Let's Play where somebody used it, which would take hours and hours. So I'm going to have to guess that it's this. It doesn't mention 2 pages. It's got 2 versions, so we could track from that, including current patch effects. Oops, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I guess we can look and see if it is doing something that... What did it actually draw here? Clear rects, push canvas, set clip rect, draws a background. What tracks are active? It does this loop, but it never draws anything. It just manipulates last used bits. Okay, then here's where it goes to the tracks. Okay, here's where it's drawing stuff. But it draws an icon. MFD add rect. So that's just telling it dirty rects, what dirty rects to update. Oh, and here it draws a string. So it draws a string and it has a track specific icon. Is there one of these drawing a bar? It doesn't seem like it. You can toggle which plots it should draw. But I don't see it drawing a plot here. That's the part that confuses me. Are the plots being drawn in the biorhythms area or something, and this lets you choose which ones are being drawn? I guess that maybe is what you're saying. So what is it querying to do this? It's querying last used bits, which is MFD bio funk. All right. So we want to see who else is using MFD bio help funk star.c. No, it's only used by bio help. Yeah, the top left is the thing I was saying is the biorhythms, that exists whether you have that tool or not. You can toggle which plots it draws. All right, well, if that were true, which I'm not, I say it as if you're wrong, but so who draws biorhythms? Well, they may have had to change this in the Mac code because in the Windows, in the DOS version, it was drawn on an interrupt, so it would run at 60 frames per second even if the game wasn't. What else would we have called it besides bio something? Lean meter. I don't see anything here that ought to correspond to that. But I mean, it has to be in here somewhere, so I'm just not recognizing the name as being relevant. I misspelled that. There we go. Status, of course. So we want to see it. So if this theory were correct, then in here where it draws the tracks, it should have some test for which tracks to draw. Draw one location tracks. If biodata.active. Well, who changes biodata.active? Right there. Status track activate. Bio help. That was what we were looking at originally, right? Yep, okay. So yes, it was calling status track activate, I just didn't see it. So, so this is bio help. Was that an MFD? Did we say it was an MFD? Was it using MFD? Yeah, MFD. Okay. So bio help. Oh, I cut and pasted this wrong. Bio help. And so that's only if you have my scan. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. What is this going to open in? Oh, I haven't demacified these. Wait, did it say carriage returns or line feeds? Let's open with Metapad. Yeah, carriage returns. Right. Okay. So, run minus test star.s mac to Unix star.s. Okay. So now, yep. Now we don't get a warning. All right. So I assume this is just splitting. Oh, no, this is an addition for the Mac, so I'm not going to bother documenting it. Because the assembly is we're getting some commentary from one of the sister site programmers. The bioplot is the weirdest feature of SS1, but it speaks so much of what kind of game it is, says one of the viewers. And the programmer comments, it was my first coding task. Maybe second after I had to get the Tri-Optimum video mail player. Yeah, Mac Classic was carriage return only. I had to write this Mac to Unix program a couple days ago to do the first pass conversion, but I didn't convert the .s files. But anyway, so the .s files are PowerPC assembly, so they aren't part of the original code base, so I'm not going to bother doing them. The original code base used ASM. It's possible that's missing from this, but there's inline assembly at least in places, and there is at least one ASM file in the thing, but I wonder if we had more ASM files than that, and they're just missing. Like, should the libraries 2D, which has all the texture mappers, have assembly code in them? Do they have the S, which is going to be the Mac one. Like flat 8, I think, was a texture mapping thing. Maybe they were all written in C? I don't know. We'll look at that later. But so biohelp and so since we just saw that that's what status is, we might as well go ahead and do that. Status.c. Let's see what all it does. Okay, here we go. It's lovely when they have this thing so I can just see what all the functions in the file are without flipping through the file. If I used a different editor, like an outlining editor, I would be able to do that directly. So that draws biorhythms, turns them on and off. Looks like that's literally all it does. Does somebody else send you the data for the biorhythm? Under bio. Oh. That's a little hard-coded screen dimension? I don't quite know. Yeah, I don't know where the data is coming from. So bioset pixel is going to be driven by the data. So height is coming from the data. Curve block. Curve block is biodata block. Oh, it's biodata right there. I'm in the wrong directory. That's all in here. That's probably the save under data. Oh no, times biodata block. Why is that stored as a uchar buffer, I wonder? Okay, here. Change biovars. That's so it is querying directly the game state, probably. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it directly queries the game state. I guess we can just put this as, we'll have a general UI category. I don't know what to call it. So is there... So the fact this worked on an interrupt in the past is probably just gone. Or it would have... Mouse lock. If endf timing callback off. Does clever incremental redraw, but not yet. Except I think it does. Because it's doing this whole thing of saving the old pixel and restoring it and stuff. Synchronous. Yeah, so synchronous is probably, yeah, when you're not doing interrupt. All right, so biorhythm display logic. That's probably good enough. Okay, and then the MFD is under UI. That's all of it. Oh, I already did that up here. Shame on me. It's really hard to see this. You really want it to... I guess I could turn off wrap, but then it's so hard to... And this, you just see that. It's always a... I guess when you're clicking on this, you're clicking on... Let's... maybe I can make these paths relative. So you'd be in this location. Let's see if that's got a prefix match or not. No, because it's tree versus blob. So you'd have to go dot 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 blob master. So it's like I can probably do this. Which is a little shorter. I guess that's short enough that I can see on this screen. Maybe I'll shrink this font back down. My chat has not updated in quite a while, like 10 minutes. It's so somebody type something. Thank you. Okay, it is still updating, just nobody said anything. That's fine. All right, shall I, somebody pick what they want me to do next instead of going in alphabetical order. You can either pick a file, you can name a kind of system you want to take a look at, or anything, any way you want to do it. Done a bstar.c. I'm going to upload this to GitHub just so I can check if the markdown formatting is right. All right, yeah. Oh, yeah. I just added it. Triggers, yeah, people had asked about triggers before. Collision detection, so rendering triggers, yeah, we can look at triggers. Drugs.c, is that where the drug visual effects are? It's probably where the drug logic happens, but I'd have to look. This is initial partial for gator. Get push. Oh, nope. I've got something wrong. This is not how you do nested. How do you do nested lists in GitHub Markdown? Do you have to switch between different markers? Oh, you use spaces. Do you have to use at least 2 spaces? Nope. That didn't nest. Maybe you do have to use 2 spaces. Oh, until the list marker lies below. It was right there. I just didn't bother reading it. And so it wouldn't even be two spaces. If I were to put, if I spaced it like this, then everything would have to also move over another line. So it has to line up with the above. Fix GitHub Markdown. Yes. So hopefully that will work. Yep. Okay. Good. Yeah, it's game triggers, I'm sure, is what people who asked for that wanted. So they're almost certainly called triggers. Hey, look, trigger.c. Let's see what else mentions it. A few people including trigger.h. Run continuous triggers. Probably want to look at all of these, like not necessarily these files, but the functions they name, which might all exist in trigger.c. Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. I gotta close some of those windows. Is Casey streaming or just tweeting or? What was I doing? Oh yes, I need to find this file so that I can go to triggers. Trigger. How big is this file? 2,500 lines. So, so doing this properly is going to be boring because I would just add to this thing trigger processing. Update my cut paste buffer like that. All right, so what is exactly in this? So here's the trap codes. As far as I can tell, these never get used. So I thought I'd move them out of the file to remove a dependency problem, but they're in the file. I guess they got moved out of the header file. I don't know. Maybe that comment is stale and refers to something else. This seems to be referring, this comment seems to be referring to a bit test macro that's not present. Oh no, bit set is the test. Sorry, my naming convention bit set would mean set the bit, but no, this is shifting and testing and making it a bool. Okay, reactor boom, QB. Are these used in this file? Trap damage code. It's going to damage the player presumably. Nope. Okay, so they're really not used. So why are they? Why do they exist? All right, well, we'll see. Maybe they're used in the editor, but it has its own list or something. I don't know what the final form of this will be. It is being posted to GitHub. I just pushed this. What we've done so far is right here on GitHub. Here, I'll link to what we've done so far. Source code structure, I think is how this works. If I go up to the top and hit enter, will that jump down? No. Wasn't that all right? How it worked? Source code structure. I'm pretty sure that was the. Yep. Okay. Yeah, it jumped down. So yeah, so this traps. Okay, yeah. So the Looking Glass terminology is traps and triggers. The traps are the things that trigger an event. Like the traps are the things that, like you step in a trap, right? Is sort of the idea, and then the trigger is what you do for it. However, these names, it's hard to be sure. Because trap destroy object link. Is that reacting to destroying an object, or is that actually or is maybe my memory is wrong? Maybe the terminology is that the trigger, that you trigger a trap. Maybe the trap is the reaction. You know, it's less like stepping in a trap and more like a gas trap that reacts. So it's the trap trigger is, you have the triggers that are the things that detect, and the traps are the reactions to it. I guess that's probably what it is. You destroy up to three objects, and then you do this. Yeah, I think that's what Doom emulation mode. Yeah, okay, so yeah, my terminology, it's been so long since we talked with anybody using that terminology, I'd gotten them backwards in my head. So yeah, the trap is the handler for the trigger. So this looks like it's mostly, even though it's called trigger, it looks like it's mostly the traps. It looks like it's maybe not the thing doing the detecting. Q data get, it's probably quest data. Quest var. But then it's with this weird Shodan thing. So I think this is maybe a good example of what Looking Glass decided to do when we did the Thief codebase, which was, we were like, the System Shock codebase is a little too hard-coded to System Shock. And it's a little too difficult to use it to make another game. And so in the Thief engine, we tried to avoid having really any game-specific knowledge in the codebase. Everything was the more generic kind of like the trap things or whatever. You know, you could have a game-specific thing in the sense of, I know how to display this MFD or whatever, but you would never directly wire the MFD up to a thing. You would always have it be componentized in this way of that allows the designer to configure, oh, this thing sets that. And like this quest variable system, this wrapper around the quest variable system, I just don't even know what it does. MFD plotware func. So there's a MFD component that is called plotware, which I assume is giving you plot information. But I don't know what it actually does. It's its own file, plotware. It's not going to be relevant to triggers, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But, okay, so comparator check. So this is a trigger system, potentially. Let's see who calls it. Is it called by trap activate on an object? So we switch on what type of object is. If it's a trap of subclass trigger, okay, if it's one of these types, I think that's what this comment is. I've said overwrite their comparator, have their comparator set to 0. But it's not setting this field to 0. It's setting this local variable to 0. Does it do that later? No. Oh, I guess that's what they mean is triggers it. Oh, I don't know what they mean by overwrite their comparator then. I guess we'd have to look at the code for this type to figure out what it means. So then the parameters are actually indirected through this thing, the trap table, from the obj ID spec ID. I don't think I need to dive into this to figure out what's going on, but I imagine the spec ID is sort of a global plot ID that, like, because you can reload levels, maybe objects don't have persistent IDs when you reload levels, but the spec ID is a persistent ID, maybe, I would guess. That's a thing I've done in games, so it seems like that might be what it's doing. That would be my best guess without having seen anything. I'm just looking through here for spec ID to see if I can get any sense of what it's... I don't know, because here it's just directly indexing into obj critter, so maybe not. Maybe it's just maybe it's just the maybe it's no, but here you have obj ID.spec ID again. Yeah. So maybe it's a species, or I don't know what you call it, a subtype, and it allocates, so if this is the generic object that has the shared stuff, and then it can be of a particular class, and then that's the data for that class. But why it's called spec, I'm not sure. Spec ID is the object class specific ID. Yeah, okay, so you probably figured this out again. Thank you. Now I understand why it's called plotware. Is that in response to what I was saying about plot, or did somebody else tweet? Because I'm not sure what the plotware is. I'm not sure what thing it would be. Like, clearly there is something in it that is plot triggered, but I don't know what it would be. Anyway, yeah, so somebody said the spec ID is the object's class specific ID. Each class has their own specific table for the parameters, and they were pointed to from the master object table indexed by object. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I just don't know why it's called spec. It's a specific, maybe. Okay, so yeah, that's a pattern I remember Looking Glass using. It's just how you make you don't want to put everything into one object, so it's like a very limited sort of form of inheritance. It's as if all the object types shared a base class that had the basic object element as the data, and then all the stuff that's not in the base class. It's a two-level hierarchy, which is just that base class and all of the other classes. And so when you're in a specific class, you get the data from some specific to your class, and then the generic data. And the spec ID is an index into the unique array. Okay, so I was doing that to do this, so that's the ob trap spec ID. All right, so a trap has 4 parameters, and we load them out of the trap. And for a fixture, so there's 2 classes of traps, trap and fixture. And they look super identical from this thing's point of view. So a fixture is probably, a fixture is an object in the world, and a trap is an invisible trigger. Although there are traps that aren't triggers, apparently. Subclass. I wonder if there's a way to find the list of what all the subclasses, trap, subclass, trigger. So let's, where are the H files? Why are the H files not in here? They're not in the libraries. Where would, they're in the files, the Mac directories that I deleted. I didn't realize they were only in those. So I'll have to restore them. I guess. And that's my best guess at the moment. So game source. Oh, no, it's just a headers directory. I didn't delete it. Okay, good. It seems odd I would have deleted it, but yeah, okay, I did. So I just want to grep in that. I closed the window accidentally. The SS shock Mac game headers, grep trap subtype trigger. Was that what it was called? No, I don't quite have the right name. Trap subclass trigger. Okay. Obj game. Obj game. Trap subclass feedbacks, trap subclass secret. So trap subclass secret is probably a Doom style-y thing that once you encounter it in the right way, it or it does nothing. Maybe there's a table, maybe it's table driven. There's nothing rude about you giving me things. I'm just teasing when I said that you should just be doing this instead of me. I'm just teasing. Okay, that clarification on the potware. Why are all the p variables, and he's already explained in chat, but I'll go ahead for other people. So this is just it's a generic system. It's just the obj traps can have all these different meanings. They're sort of a further subtyping of the stuff we saw of here's all the different traps, all the underscore funcs. There's different things traps can do. Traps can destroy objects. They can do this. So they just have generic functions P1, P2, P3, P4, and it's up to each function to decide what it does, right? You can see that this can use a function table because they all have the same type. Like here's one that's it's given the names instead of calling P1, P2, P3, P4. It actually has names for them. But and you just do that so that in the editor you just configure your trap, and maybe the editor is smart enough to display the names for them, maybe it's not. But it's just you don't define a separate struct for each one of these that has the type names. In the struct, they're just called P1, P2, P3, P4. Where was that function I was looking at? Here it is. And so here it's about to call the function. I guess that's grind trap. Okay, so trap activate gets triggered by some other code, which we'll look at in a second. And then it calls comparator check. So each trap trigger setup has this comparator, which is some kind of decision thing that says, should I fire or not? Which is, again, going to be like configurable probably with different things. So, the comparator can look at quest variables, which is variables that evolve through the plot as you do quests, basically. It's terminology that's held over from Ultima Underworld, probably. This one just gives you 0 or 1 quest bit get comparator and 0xff not equal 0. Okay, so the quest variable system, some of them are variables, and so the comparator has. Okay, so comparator has a few things in it. It has a fail code, which we'll have to look at in a second to see what that means. That's 8 bits. It can just immediately be true, like the comparator, right? We're checking, should we fire this trap? So the normal case is, yes, always fire the trap. But you can check, you get this 16-bit value, and if this bit is set, that's not the smallest bit, so it's and we'll use some of the bits here. Okay, so if one of the bits in that is set, it means to get one of these FFF, so that's 1,000. 1,000 is 1,000 hex is 2 to the 12, so there's 4,096. There might be ints, they might be chars. They might be 8 bits. They might be 32 bits. I don't know offhand. I'm not gonna bother checking right now. So you can, and then some of the quest state is just a single bit, and so here, quest bit get takes another 4K. There might be 4,096 quest bits. I don't know. The whole point is the comparator allows for there to be up to 4,096, even if that many aren't allocated, and it doesn't bother checking as well. Then it extracts what kind of comparison it wants to do, and does that comparison. So it basically lets you write a little thing on your trap trigger that says, has the player done this yet? Just testing a quest 5. Or you can say, you know, is the player's health above this amount if that were being stored in the quest data system? I don't know if it is. So I don't know what range of things this can be used for, but that's what the comparator is doing. So this doesn't evaluate, this file doesn't, maybe it does. Let's see who all calls trap activate. Yeah, so a lot of them are in here. A few of them are external. So we want to actually look at all the trap activate calls in here. Right, so trigger check destroyed. So you can have a trigger that reacts if the object gets destroyed, I think. Presumably, maybe not, since what it's testing is... Oh, yeah, I see. So anytime an object gets destroyed, this function gets called. And then the code checks is that object of type fixture, subclass cyber. So it's a certain kind of object in cyberspace. Fixtures, as I think I said, are basically objects that are immobile. So like, you know, in a lot of games, or old school games, like it might be like, you know, a desk or, you know, a statue on a pedestal kind of thing in that sense. That's not necessarily what they're used for in System Shock, but that's sort of the conceptual idea. It's stuff that is like the terrain, the world stuff, in that it is immobile, but it is handled by being classified as an object. In this case, it's the cyberspace stuff. So in cyberspace, you go and shoot at these things and you get upgrades and stuff from them. And so that probably is done through this system when the thing that you shoot that gives you the upgrade is classified as a fixture. It'll call the trap activate on it, on the object, and then the object. So is there... Yeah, we saw that when we were looking at trap activate, there was a special case for is it a fixture? And the fixtures were able to just directly have on them trap info. So what this thing is doing, so then location trigger activate. So there's a floor trigger, and the player has to be close to the floor. Standard size. Is standard size like the height of the player? What would happen? Is the player's position stored not at his feet, but at the top of his head? Fixed from obj height. So the height of the player has to be less than the map height plus standard size. Obj height must be the actual... I don't know. I'm not going to dive into that yet. There's some... Obviously, the point is supposed to be that you're standing on the floor. And here's a trigger that just if you're in that location at all. Okay, so most of them are here. Some of them are not. So schedule.c is probably some kind of timed trigger. Objuice might be like if you open certain doors, maybe it can trigger. GameSys could be anything. We'll check real quick, like the objuice, just to get a sense, because what I want to do is in this document say what this function does, and so I want to know how many of the triggers are handled here. So I just want to get a sense of the triggers that aren't handled here. Obj fixture zoom. What would that be? Zoom. Inst flags and class inst flag. Okay, what's class inst flag? That's not going to be documented, I'm sure. Class-specific stuff. Oh, okay, here. We need to know what type of object this is. Oh, it's object fixture zoom, so it's probably a fixture. No documentation for what it means for fixtures. Grab and zoom MFD. MFD fixture func. MFD info slot. So maybe zoom means like double clicking in the world? In inventory. We have to look at who calls this. I mean, wrong directory. It's in the same file. Okay, what are we doing? Antenna and stuff, that's all plot stuff. So like, nope, okay, it's object use. So you clicked on an object to use it, and that calls object fixture zoom. And it's going to grab an MFD. I don't know why they called it zoom. Maybe you're zooming in on it conceptually. So you've clicked on a fixture in the world. So it grabs an MFD, and in the MFD slot, it is giving you info about the thing you clicked in the world. So I don't know what, I'm now not quite sure what fixtures, I guess this flag is whether you should do that or not. If you don't grab the MFD, then you do a trap activate. So that's just a particular case of triggering a trap that I don't think there's any clear, simple classification for it. I kind of want to define the terms here, so maybe I'll just do that. MFD zoom would be for keypad panels. Oh, when you hit a locked door and it opens and it brings up a keypad. But no, you would click on the keypad. Yeah, so maybe it is for keypads. Actually, the trigger passes the parameters. All right, I think that covers the trigger system. Were people expecting more detail than that? I have too many windows open. Let me close some. Let's see. I said I needed this for the directories, but I've been cut and pasting those, so that's probably fine. Don't need that anymore. Don't need that I do not need two of these. Close that. And my email, I'll just close my email. There were some exceptions to traps there. What am I thinking about the source code so far? This is not my first exposure to the source code. I worked on this game in a very, very small capacity. There were some exceptions to traps there, but that was enough. Well, no, if there were exceptions, I kind of would like to get it right, but I don't know quite what you mean by exceptions in this circumstance. I'm assuming this is all the functions. I'm not going to go through the whole thing to check. I guess I could look at what these hacks are. Like this one has 4 parameters. So, oh yeah, it's a /func. So hack change comparator. That's obviously going to change a comparator on an existing trap. The question is what triggers it. Hack taunt Diego. I don't know why this is in this trigger system, unless it's in P2 and P3, so maybe it's called by another trap. Yep, it is. Aha, so a hack is a specific meaning in here. The trap hack function. As we need hacks in the game, just add new cases when you need to do your particular hack. So this was a generic trap type that you could just then subconfigure your own particular behaviors out of. It used remember there's 4 parameters for traps, so it uses the first one to decide which subtype it is, and then you only have 3 parameters left for your own custom hack trap. And so they're just all the special things they need to do, including the most boring make this trap do something to a door somewhere else on the level. Game over hack. You just kill the player spontaneously. And it doesn't give you any feedback. Kind of weird. Maybe it would trigger some other hack that like played a cutscene or something and then trigger the game over hack. But anyway, yeah, I'm comfortable at this level of detail just considering the hack system a trap. A big trap thing. Yeah, if I were going through this file in detail trying to say everything that's in it, but that's further down the pipe that would happen. If I were doing that, then yeah, I'd want to go into that level of detail. But it's not necessary at this point because we just want to get through all the files. Not necessarily today, but that's the first step is to get through all the files. So we've done trigger. Did we do anything else while we were doing this? No, we didn't. Now I was looking at what other functions call. What was it called? Trigger, trap, activate trap. What was it called? Trap. What was the top level trap function? Called comparator. Trap activate. Right, so I was looking at trap. Oh, it's up here now. I see it. I didn't see it at first. So yeah, I looked at one of these, and it's not worth going into those files now because it's just a minor side thing on that file. I mean, there's alternative system to bypass something. Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, people asked about the rendering, and I can't go into the low-level rendering because that's in a library, and I don't want to dig into the libraries right now. But we can see what we can find here. This will have sort of a high-level rendering, like traversing the map and figuring out which things to draw. There was something called cone. Let me check real quick. See if that's a rendering-related thing. I mean, it's playing with polygons. So, because it might be the frustum or something. The viewer point. What the frick is this doing? It's just when you see cone in a game, you think the view cone, even though it's not really a cone. So it was just natural to be suspicious about it. So I think it might be the frustum, but I'm really not sure. The view polygon. What is a view polygon? Initialize these to weenie values. Triggers that is under it. This is for the top scan line. I don't know. I'm not positive what's going on in this. View cone list has max points times 2. How many points is max points? 8. So your view vectors 4, that could be the 4 corners of the frustum. I guess the question here is, what's the public function here that's called externally? FR clip. There's a whole bunch of FR functions. Is that all going to be rendering? There's game rend. Probably top level, high level function. Do secret effects. Game sys render effects. So this is like overlaying stuff. Yeah. Draw a single static line, so that's going to probably be the when you're fighting Shodan. The fighting Shodan overlays. When do you get static? You get static when you're just when you take damage, or when you die, maybe, or something. Or maybe this is a different meaning of static. No, it's doing a little random number thing. So it's got to mean static in the sense of television static. Right, so this is that. Blitting isn't the right word either, because it actually has stuff called blitters. I wonder what FR stands for. R for render, but I don't know what the F stands for. Game sys render function. Shouldn't that actually really render? Because all these, this one falls through. Because it's solid FR solid color. And then this is solid, draws the solid color. I don't know. I don't know what the mask is. Save load messes with it. Does the system shock just have weird color transitions, and that's what this is? I just don't know what the mask would be. I guess I need to dig into that one right there. Oh, that's what I'm on right now. What is flags coming from? It's passed in. I just don't. I would have thought this would have. Oh, maybe this just doesn't have an explicit default case. Maybe the default case is that it doesn't do anything. Okay, you make a canvas out of it, but it never renders it. It just clears. Wouldn't you think a render func would render? Maybe that's not what static means? No, it's got to be what static means, because I looked and saw that. Yeah. Where does it actually draw? Let's secret effects. Oh, there's a separate render func and a separate draw func. So I was looking at render func, but there's draw func. So probably the caller. Rend tool. Yeah, this is the boring part, but I want to have a sense of the outer structure before I dive into the inner structure. I could work bottom up instead of top down, but here's a good comment. I have fixed this so the cursor does not flicker. It just works. Note its simplistic beauty. I love this job. This is never true now. What is the mouse lock thing? So the mouse ran on an interrupt, and in that interrupt, it would draw the mouse cursor. And so if that interrupt occurred in the middle of certain operations here, the mouse uses the same 2D rendering library that everything else does. So this interrupt triggers, you have your stack with all of your regular game code running, you're in the middle of rendering, interrupt happens, pushes new stuff on the stack. The mouse code saves the current draw canvas, sets the draw canvas to its drawing thing, which is the whole screen, the actual physical screen, I think, but it still uses the canvas system. Saves or restores. I don't remember how that stuff works, but it restores what's already there, what was used to be there, and draws the mouse again. So again, this allowed the mouse to move at 60 hertz, or the mouse interrupt speed, even if the frame rate was lower, and the frame rate was always lower, right? So, and much like the biorhythm stuff, all this interrupt stuff went away when you went to Windows or the Mac. And of course, once your game is running at 60 hertz, due to the fast computers, it's not a problem. But at the time, having your mouse respond at 10 hertz was terrible. So there's this whole mouse interrupt system. But there's some reason, and I don't remember why, that if you're doing certain parts of 2D rendering, like actually interacting with the canvas system, you don't want the mouse to trigger while you're doing that, because it somehow leaves things in a broken state. I don't see why it would if the mouse saves and restores it, but apparently it did. I know this very specifically because this was one of the things that I was involved in. There was a bug where I could get the game to either start drawing black or start just totally drawing weirdly. And, I found it I was running around and I ran into this wall, and somehow it glitched in this way, and I could reproduce it 50% of the time. And so it turned out to be one of these mouse locking things not being set correctly. So it didn't really have anything to do with what I was running into, but since I was able to trigger it semi-consistently, I had to be there for the debugging. So I watched this being debugged. So not this specific code, but I do remember this whole mouse locking thing. And I think it was actually a subtle... Yeah, the mouse saving the stuff I just described isn't quite right because it doesn't handle correctly the case that you draw where the mouse is. But I don't think that's what this is blocking. It might be. Maybe that's why. So it's just when you actually are blitting to the screen, you have to turn off the mouse. But I don't think is this blitting to the actual screen? Oh, this is rend mouse hide. So this would not actually be the thing that's blitting. So I think there might be a thing that you do where, since you know the mouse cursor has the wrong, if you draw over it, so what might be is that you lock out the mouse cursor, draw, and then intentionally call the mouse function that reloads it's called save under, I think was what we called it. So the save under for the mouse is wrong because you just rendered to it. So you call the mouse to have it recompute the save under again or something like that. It literally says keep the mouse locked while we blade. Yeah, you're right. It does. But I think that's what this then is probably doing, is recomputing the mouse save under, I would guess. So rend mouse hide stands for hide the mouse while I'm rendering, I guess. Although it does look like it has a paired rend mouse show. But no, this definitely mouse lock plus plus and plus. So hide and show are not paired because this one balances its plus plus and its minus minus. And of course, if mouse is doubly locked, this just doesn't do anything. Oh, no. Okay, here we go. It increments it again. So it increments it to 1 here, to 2 here. This turns it back to 0. So if we did render, it gets left non-zero. And mouse locked, in fact, is the amount that needs to be restored. So once you finish with rend mouse hide, the mouse may still be locked and you have to call rend mouse show to fix that. That makes sense. See, I'm figuring this out in way more detail than I want to because I would want to write all that down now that I figured it out. But these are function pointers that they're being stored into. I have to find that. It's called an FR setup. Yes, raise for the I think it's the thing I'm saying. You have to fictionally you maybe also draw the mouse, but you need to also oh right, you don't have to. You do have to get the save under, but maybe you do that by calling the mouse to make the mouse draw. Also, I don't see why it wouldn't flicker because during the interrupt, like if the display goes by while it's doing it. Anyway, I don't know. Shouldn't this all be double buffered? I guess it's not because it's doing all this. It's doing all this hidden rectangle. Not hidden rectangle. What do we call the rectangle stuff? It is hidden rectangle. No. What are the words I'm looking for? The dirty rects. It's doing dirty rect rendering. When you're in full screen, that's pointless. But when you're in the normal MFD display, and only half of the screen is 3D, you might be on a slow computer. So we're doing all this dirty rect updating of the MFD stuff. Don't know how that intersects with the mouse restore save under stuff. You would have to lock the mouse, restore the mouse save under, because it might also overlap other stuff, and then do your drawing and then redraw the mouse. That's what you would have to do inside this. Where's the blit? Unless it's that somehow. Like it literally says keep the mouse locked while we blit, but I don't see a blit in here. Double size off screen canvas probably. Double sizing and draw the cursor in the temporary doubled canvas. In slot view, adjust the cursor position. Unless last cursor func is actually blitting. No, there's no way. Look at those parameters. That's just got to be drawing the mouse. So it's keeping the mouse locked while we blit the mouse, I think, is what that means. Yeah, sorry, that's what Fabian said. Maybe it's just blitting the mouse cursor in there. So yeah, so rend mouse hide actually draws the mouse cursor. Maybe that's the restore. But I gotta actually look at what it's called. Game rend. Is that what the file I was looking at? Yep. What is it called? fr mouse hide. It's sfx vhold. I don't really care about sfx. But okay, so it calls hide here. It's going to do a bunch of rendering, and then it's going to call show. So probably it leaves the mouse. Since it doesn't restore the mouse in mouse show, I think it just leaves the mouse cursor invisible until the next time you get a mouse interrupt. Maybe there's also code to force it to draw at the end of the loop or something. Because if you don't move the mouse, you never get a mouse interrupt. Maybe there's a timer also that does it. Yeah, so it seems like that must be all right. So game rend, I'm not going to figure out exactly what it does right now because it's doing too much stuff. But that has the top, what looks like the top level rendering. Which includes drawing some effects, drawing MFDs. Here's overlay showdown. That's the thing that showdown appears as with individual pixels sort of as it that's weird. Thresh fail question 1 2 I. Oh, it's skipping. I see. It's just skipping pixels. That seems to only have 3 states, and that's not what, or 2 states rather, which is not what. Like that would draw every other pixel some of the time. And all the pixels the rest of the time. But anyway, so there's some thresholding here where it decides whether or not you should draw a given pixel with the showdown overlay because showdown fades in. Sort of fades in at individual pixels that slowly hide what you're doing as you're in that boss fight. But where did it draw the actual game? HUD do objects. I guess it's possible that the game already got drawn before this. Back in rend tool again. That seems unlikely. If it's being set as a pointer, as a function pointer, it seems like it's got to actually do the drawing somewhere in here. But it has to happen before this showdown overlay. Oh, V-hold shift is the television vertical hold. It scrolls the thing. When you get EMP damage, I think it scrolls the display for a moment. And that's what this V-hold effect is. So it must have already computed the actual thing. So maybe depth canvas is what you're drawing into, and fake depth BM is actually the rendered scene or something. Trying to keep V-hold shift in original through 2200 is to avoid the wacky hots bugs of shifting screen mode in the middle of an EMP grenade. There you go. I don't know what bugs it's talking about, but that's pretty explicit. So, yeah, somebody else must have already called the renderer at this point. So that was FR. We don't know. We have to see what FR set global callbacks does. No, I'm looking for the main entry point for the world rendering. I haven't found it. That's not in this file. FR setup. FR glob draw call and FR glob render call. So let's look for. Oh wait, right. We had looked at that render func before. So the draw func seems like it's what blitzed to the screen, but the render func doesn't ever seem to draw it. So it still seems like I'm missing a thing. So I do want to see who calls it. So that was what we just found what its real name was. Rep fr glob draw call. So let's see. Did I put a space in? Why are you trying to use that? It's I have 2 reps. It's still in FR setup somewhere. All right. Glob draw call. Some more setup. Wait, where do you call it? Oh, you're sticking it into this now. Draw call. So let's see. Probably in the same function. Yep, here it is. Send to firm. It's FR draw call. Excuse me. All right, so draw call. Draw the overlays. Here we go. FR send view. James. Render the stars if there were no stars in the scene. It simply returns. Spin it more when reactor blows. Rotation every 20 minutes, every 1 minute after explosion. That's how fast the star field turns, so implies the spinning rate of the whole station is 20 minutes and then 1 minute. G3 start object angles Y. So G3 is the graphics system. Calls the star rendering function. Then it's done with the G3 system. Stereo support, we had headsets that had 3D rendering and I guess stereo and guess tracking. I guess they were VR headsets or something. Don't know what double sizing is. Is it just doubling the, is it just pixel doubling? I don't know. Draw the overlays. Okay, if it's not okay to double, where do you draw the game? Oh, this is also late. If you're doing the star rendering, that's actually after you rendered everything else. I was thinking, oh, you're drawing the background, so you draw the stars first. But no, you don't. You draw the stars last. FR main. Guess what? The place to start this is the one that has main in the title. So the company that released this, Night Dive Studios, is in the middle of a System Shock remake remaster that is and they obviously did solve some of the intellectual property issues because they claim copyright over the thing, so they must have copyright control over the code. They did not release the data. I don't know if that's because they don't want to cannibalize their own sales or if they don't have the rights to open source the data. Who knows? So Night Dive Kickstarter. I will give the link in the chat for this. Updates. So here you can read about what is going on with the Night Dive System Shock redo. Do you work professionally in the industry as a programmer? I was a programmer proper in the industry for 6 or 7 years at Looking Glass in the 90s. I started working there just when this game was about to ship. Then I was an indie, and currently I work at a company called Rad Game Tools, who make libraries for games, but we don't make games ourselves. So we're kind of in the game industry and kind of not, depending on how you view it. Um, but yes, my specific um, reason I'm doing this is because I have some familiarity with this code base, although I did not work on it very much. Most of the stuff is brand new to me, but I have a decent memory of System Shock, but not as good a memory as one of the other guys in chat who also is like remembers these things that I don't remember. Dirt Saha. I don't know if he's still here, but they're still selling Shock Classic and Enhanced Edition as far as I know, so I guess it's to do with that. Yeah, I don't know if it is Night Dive the one who's getting the money from that, and so they don't want to cannibalize their old sales, or somebody has the rights to sell it and they don't want to stomp on that. I don't know. So I was going to look for send view. Oh, I see it right here. Send it, whether it came from 3D or special. Okay, so FR rend, FR prepare view, FR start view. So here we go. Here's where the rendering really happens. FR pipe go 2, FR pipe go 3. So is that going to be like 2D and 3D? Those are externs. This is not them. Wait, this is... no, I was just misspelling it. Okay, they are externs, so. I actually rendered the stuff. That one's just not called anywhere. That's going to be some other FR file. FR pipe. Maybe pipeline or something. Okay, so FR setup, FR main, all it does is call FR rend. So there we go. Good starting point. Oops. What else did we do? Status.c. Now we're doing FR main.c. Yeah, Fabian is going to say what by the time I say this, Fabian will have already said what I said. But I said this earlier on in the thing. The code is going to look like crap, and that's because that's what actual real game code looks like. And this is always true of every game code base. Everybody always is apologizing about how bad their code is when they release it, and you have that, was it Celeste or whatever, that released the code of the player movement, and everybody was down on it. It's just like, this is what actually happens when, especially with games. Maybe Fabian's opinion is that this happens everywhere, but one of the things that happens with games very commonly is that, especially games of this era and modern indie games, is that you're not reusing the code base. You're going to ship it and you're done with the code base. And that means there's less pressure to keep the code high quality for future maintenance, because it's not a Photoshop that is a perennial product that needs to be maintained and features added and stuff like that. And so the incentives are a little different. But also, I think what happens in at least Looking Glass games, and maybe in lots of games, is that early on stuff is more solidly coded, more carefully structured, and then things become more, as you get closer to shipping, your code style starts to become more, let me get this thing working, and less, let me do this thing right. One of the things I've mentioned also is that the Thief code base is a little bit different in that it tries to be so much more systematized that I suspect if we could see the code, we would have actually a better impression. It's still going to have hack stuff that got in there towards the end as they're shipping, but because the same code base was used for both Thief and System Shock 2, there had to be a little bit less of that. And it was literally used for both. Like the editor, you just used a different config file with the editor to launch, to choose which of the games you were editing. And and there was still game-specific code in there, but it was shared by both things because it was game in editor. So the editor had the full game in it, so it really had both games in it. But yeah, like somebody mentioned scalable variables, and that's like another good example. I mean, I personally think global variables are fine in certain kinds of circumstances in general, but like if you're a solo programmer, it's not really an issue. But the thing that happens is you're like, for example, I'm in this system and I'm calling something that calls 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 something, and from that original thing, I want to pass a new parameter to that final thing that's being called, and I can change the prototypes of 12 different functions on the way down to have them all pass that extra parameter along, and then every other thing that calls them also needs to now pass a dummy value for that parameter or whatever, and make lots and lots of code changes. Or I can go add a global variable, the top level function sets the global variable, and that low level function queries that global variable. And when you're writing a single threaded code base, that kind of quote unquote hack, because our programming languages don't have a better technology for that, it's kind of the best thing that you can do. Jonathan Blow's language, JAI, has this notion of a dynamic context, which I think Lisp also maybe has, that is passed up and down. And so if you set some state in that global context, someone else can access that from 12 functions deep. However, I don't think his intention was to expose it as this thing you can easily generically add to. I think it's intended to have a more heavyweight thing. Like he talks about using it for setting the memory allocator and state like that. But that's an example of a kind of tool that a programming language could have that would help you avoid that circumstance where you might otherwise use a global variable. But if you don't have that feature, you use a global variable. It's less risk to your code to make that change than to try to plumb it all the way through. And you can debate whether that's, even if you had the time and the tests and the stuff that would be safe to plumb it all the way through, you can debate whether it's really the right thing, because you're exposing this communication to all these intervening functions that don't care and shouldn't need to care, and yet becomes part of their function prototype, their description. But people are dogmatic, and people believe in object-oriented programming, and all sorts of things that I think are bad ideas. So the fact that some people would find that, no, it's all globals are evil. Well, okay, I just don't agree with them. So FR main is the top level render 3D scene and add and call overlays. Just want to make it clear that none of those things are in this file. All right, so that's FR main. Let's just go through the rest alphabetically, and even though that's not how they're structured necessarily. Now that I have some sense of what's going on. Which we might miss something if it's not prefixed with FR, but... Citadel renderer. Camera position modification creation system. So I wonder if FR, maybe Citadel was a rename. Maybe it was originally called something else that was F. Oh, here it is. Support for Cyberman, VFX1, other 6D control structure. VFX1 headset. Consumer level head mount display marketed by camera. Did it and offered head tracking? Yeah. Okay. So yep. What was the resolution? 263 by 230, which sounds terribly low, and it was terribly low. But the game itself typically ran 320 by 200. You could go higher res on the CD version, but your PCs of the time couldn't do very well with it. In fact, we infamously turned off the highest resolution mode at the last minute before shipping, so that nobody would select it and complain about how slow it was. Oh, and it actually took paletted colors. Head movements were tracked with internal size, pitch, roll, and yaw. So yeah, only 3 DOF didn't have translation tracking of head position. It only had head orientation. But yeah, so somebody at the company implemented that. I guess DC added some of the support for it, DC being Doug Church. It's interesting, this file actually has the log. A lot of these files don't have a log, so you don't get to see who did what. But it looks like Doug did a lot of the rendering stuff, probably. Why am I so bright in that? Nobody complained about the lighting here. Did that change? Has it been that bad the whole time? I'm so, like, washed out. Did I ever link the night dive thing? Yeah, I did. Okay. So I can close that window. Let me see about tweaking the camera. Where's the, oh, it's this. I do this. Yeah, it's going to be hard to balance that. I don't have my lights because I moved things, so I don't have lights set up for getting bare light, so I'm getting a lot of light off the monitor. Oh, well, I don't know what to do about it. I'm so pink now. And if I move away, I'm just too dark. Well, why am I so pink? I don't know. Well, that seems to help. My bet is it is a typo. Unknown Jackson, yeah. Thank God we have commit messages. Where's that? Unknown. Oh, I see. Yeah. Oh, unknown checks in. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I've mentioned, this is the code base in which, yeah, this is the kind of comment that you find in a lot of the code, where there's a comment above a function, which you would hope would tell you what the function does, and instead it's just a quote from some song. I mean, on the other hand, those comments never go out of date. All right, so what kind of camera support do we do here? It presumably just grabs the object's orientation and position, puts it into store. If our camera get object, so then this will call get object. Yep. So if the camera's on an object, get it from the object. So, which it normally is in first person, but if you have the headset, it'll apply the headset stuff probably. So I think that's all that is. I don't type the parenthesis. If our camera see. It probably wasn't the song playing in his head. It was probably the song playing on the stereo. But I don't know. It's possible that people would try to pick things. Maybe there was some like thematic. He saw some thematic connection between what the code was doing. I don't see how, but all right, FR clip. So that's probably going to do frustum clipping. Various clippers for terrain, including basic cone clip. There's that cone. And later day tile-based clipper, which might be the thing Art wrote. No, doesn't look like it because it's all DC. I know Artmin. Why I called him Art Minman before, I don't know. But Minman, Mr. Minman in the chat, if he's still around, Artmin, I'm pretty sure I remember that he wrote some of the stuff to decide how much of the grid to draw. Doing probably some kind of occlusion, tracking along occlusions, but maybe just traversing the frustum. I don't remember now. But we'll probably find it as we go. So yeah, this is calling cone stuff, I think. I see the word cone. Anyway. There's all this stuff that spans, and I think that spans of grid map grid tiles, probably. Yeah, I'm not going to dive into the details of what this is doing right now. We can do that someday. Clip door mask, clip major mask. So this is a code. This sounds like the code I was thinking was Art's, but it's only got Doug's check-ins on it. Because this seems like it's the whole thing about moving along tiles and these masks would imply that you don't bother traversing through them if they're occluded on a grid basis. Amazing comments. Okay, northward is done super grossly at the moment. But yeah, oh, this doesn't use my style of curly braces. It's 3-space indentation, but this is on its own line. Good Lord, I have no idea what any of this code is doing. If we were cool. Apparently we were not cool. So this code is not in use. FR-ret. I'm not sure why that's a macro. Maybe it's not a macro? It's got to be a macro, right? All right, whatever. So this is doing something that I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing it is determining which tiles to draw. So that's why I will put I guess I should look at the caller so that I'm not uncertain. I should see who calls this and of our main. Clipping and sort pass says the call to it. So it's also determining what objects are visible. Somewhere in here. Obj. At each square code objects. That doesn't do anything with objects, I don't think, unless I'm... No, there's no way that does. So which one of these things is doing something with objects? Move new dells. I don't see anything to do with objects. It is a back to front sort, but and it might be, and I don't know if it's frustum culling or also occlusion culling. I think it's also occlusion culling. But since it says it gathers objects, you would think it would gather objects. Unless it's somehow doing it secretly that I can't tell. Code objects is kind of a little ambiguous. Maybe I should check for. So I have real obstack. It's only saying about spanless. It's never setting up an obstack. Oh, these comments are so amazing. Object block. Is that like an object blocking visibility somehow? Oh, doors. Doors are objects, probably. So since it's S clip door, so maybe that's. Is it a door? Is it an object that blocks visibility due to that kind of thing? So maybe that other comment is just a lie. This comment clipping an ob sort pass. Maybe that's not really ob sorting. So let's go back to fr main. So it starts with clip cone, then it does clip tile. So clip clone is generating, I would guess, all of the is generating everything within the view cone. And then clip tile is probably figuring out what things are occluded due to not being able to see through good squares and stuff. Like, so clip cone is probably does not pay any attention to. Oh no, that was what we were looking at. Simple cone clip pass, okay. That would be the thing I just said. Which is in cone, which we've looked at before at the start of this, because I was suspicious. Cone clips the errors and calls store expand on the contents of the cone. Store expand. Doesn't call store expand anymore, okay. cone span set. But why would it return? Shouldn't you do everything? It's saying that the entire view cone is the same. I guess if you're looking straight up, I don't know how you could get that to happen. How do you get a horizontal line out of a view cone? All right, whatever. Maybe it's not actually possible, and he's just being paranoid. So but it's not in a loop. Here's the loop. So for each span, you determine where the left and right edges clip, probably. Yeah, something like that. Okay. So yeah, I think that's what that's doing. It's just determining view frustum intersection with the terrain grids. So that's cone.c. Let's just assert it. Determine which map grid cells are within a view frustum. Possibly producing it in sorted order, I don't know. And then, so cone clip first calls that, then calls set clip bits. And if it's not debugging, return. So we just have to look at set clip bits. So obviously all these things are communicating with global variables. Bits. Loops through all the cones. And just initializes them. So that's just initializing them to the unclipped state. And it does nothing else. So clip cone, that's called in main. This just generates, as it says, the basic spans and sets their clipping states to empty. Then clip tile, it must really be doing the object gathering. I just don't see where. Each square code objects. Maybe they're linked lists and it's just concatenating the linked lists. What? Where is this object stuff happening? All right, why don't I go find who renders the objects and I can find out what data structure they're coming from and track that back. So it's going to be an FR object or something like that. FR obj. Object draw setup code. Pick best ref. Okay, so it's probably using a ref system like we used in Terra Nova, which is an object that's in more than one tile, puts down refs to itself in each of those tiles. So each tile has a linked list of refs that are refs to different objects, or to actually linked list of refs, and each of those refs points to a different object. So a given tile can have multiple refs to multiple objects, and a given object can have multiple refs to, because they're in multiple tiles. So there's like two separate linked lists of those refs. That's, I believe, what we did in Terra Nova, and probably what this is doing as well. So I would guess that pick best ref is like which, if an object is in multiple cells, you want to draw it in the frontmost cell, so figure out which one's frontmost. So you would expect it would be trying to find which one's nearest. Here we go. LDist, absolute of the position relative to camera, probably. XY is the map position. FRXN. So that's global variable. That's the renderer state. So it would make sense that XN and YSN are just the map coordinates of the camera. So it finds whichever one is nearest in this, according to this function, which is Manhattan distance. Why did somebody say ban me, ban me? I'll ban him if he's going to be a jerk, but... Oh, that's because Abner came in. Never mind. Don't worry, I don't like knee-jerk ban people on that kind of thing. I try to make sure I understand the context first. But I had to scroll back to find Abner saying that he was available to ban people. Somewhere these objects are coming from. So where is it getting the... This is pick best ref. So this is after you've already iterated through objects. So render parse obj. Okay, so this is probably finding all the objects it needs to render. So it's FTD MPT pointer, of course. FDT pointer. Oh geez. Oh geez. It's almost all FRTR though. FR pipe has some. Render sorted obj. When did they get sorted? Sort show obj. Render parse obj. But why does this do plural and this is singular? Is render parse obj just called once? Is that back in FR main? Nope. No, it should be interleaved, right? You draw a tile and then you draw the objects for that tile. So FDT M pointer might be the current tile or something. Which would be FR pipe, which I think we haven't looked at yet. Pipeline controller. So I think this is going to interleave drawing tiles and drawing objects. Pipe start. Pipe end. Oh, you stupid thing. New diamond scan pipeline. Eh? Dumb hack for now. Oh boy. FR points. There's a lot of files in this. Oops. Point allocation, delta list maintenance, etc. Oh, because you don't want to do the 3D math multiple times probably, and so maybe it's trying to share points between adjacent tiles or something, possibly. Maybe not. Because you'd have to detect whether they were the same point, so maybe that's too much work. So maybe it's just allocating and deallocating them. Dumb hack for now. Something goofy used by the renderer. This is so well named. Okay, I feel a little bit less bad about the fact that Terra Nova had two rendering functions named foo 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 and bar 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 bar, because this is peak naming. Create a new one. Otherwise, are you not creating a new one? Pointless. No, you're, well, you fix making, so you're creating a new coordinate in DF. Then you're going to add delta Z to an existing point. Oh, this is just like a homogeneous heap or something, and it's allocating X's, how many of them you've... No, oh, but because it's X, that's actually the map X. Wow, I don't know. Pointless 0 plus X, so it's like you're storing one per map? Weird. I don't know. But you can see this replace add delta x. I believe the whole point is that you are moving a known distance in world space. You're moving by like 1 in world space. And so rather than apply a full camera rotation matrix, it just says, oh, I can update that point because I know the 3D vector for if you're moving along the x-axis, that's this particular thing. And so it's sort of decomposed and tries to save 3D computation that way. It started alphabetically, yeah, and with a little bit of stepping, and then this is actually the list of files that I've done, except I didn't update it. So we decided to do the trap trigger system, which I ended up documenting those 2 files, and now we're looking at the renderer, and we've gotten through that many files so far. All right, so right now what I wanted to do, the only reason I was doing this was because I wanted to find where the object stuff came from. I see it now. Map elem. Okay, so it's an actual pointer to the map. So the map is keeping the list of refs, so the rendering system doesn't do anything special for the objects. That's why it's not actually gathering the objects. Makes perfect sense. I don't know why I didn't think that through. If I thought about what it needed to do, it makes perfect sense. So if we go back to FR main, okay, so this generates basic spans. This determines which tiles are visible. That's really all it does. Then we go through and we render all the tiles. And each time we render a tile, we have to draw the geometry in that tile, and we have to draw the list of objects in that tile. There is some code that makes sure we don't draw objects twice because they can be in multiple tiles. So there is some special handling for that stuff, so it's not quite that trivial, but that's the basic idea. Okay, so now we can go back just to which file was it that I was trying to understand what it was for. I was going through alphabetically, wasn't I? Right, I went to FR camera, and then I was trying to figure out what FR clip does, and it was unclear, so I was looking at the context for it, and this was kind of unclear. So clip command has generated all the spans, and then FR clip tile does so much work. It's got to be doing some kind of occlusion-y. Well, wait, no, clip tile doesn't do much work. It was clip. What was this clip span, or is this all being called by clip? No, okay. If this is being called by the clip tile, then yeah, it's doing a lot of work. So it would make sense, like you've. So what we can imagine is going on, again, I didn't plan on going into this much detail, but I might as well. So what you can imagine is going on, this doesn't really have a grid, so yeah, that's going to be impossible. You can use shift, yeah, you can use shift. Accept it. Great grid. So here's the map, which is a grid. And then you have some kind of view cone of the direction you're looking. How do you, I don't know how you do this in MS Paint anymore. So say it's 90 degree field of view, so it's like that. And then the renderer produces a list of spans of what it needs to actually render. I really need layers. So we'll draw the span as like this kind of box. So the line includes all of these squares, but it doesn't include this square. Oh, no, that goes one further. So it produces spans that it needs to draw, something like this. And it may have produced them already in the correct order. I don't know. Like the cone generator might have produced them in the right order. Not positive. I should have picked a different orientation for this. Yeah, god damn it. And enter doesn't work. I don't know what you have to hit to get it to like accept the thing. And click somewhere else. That seems dumb. So this line change colors. So the clip has generated these spans. And what could happen is that, but I believe cone generates the spans without ever looking at the map. So then if the map actually is I don't really want the outline there. So if the map actually contains that, maybe that isn't good enough. Maybe it actually needs to be like that. Like these are solid things. Then possibly it's doing something where it like scans along this way, scans along this way, scans along this way, and can stop here because these are all solid. But it scans along here this way and doesn't see that one. Scans along here this way, doesn't see that one. Scans along here this way. There's various complexity to that because, you know, if you see this all the time in write-ups about how to make roguelikes with the lighting or the visibility that is limited. It's the exact same kind of algorithm. So that's, you know, if this, why can't I erase? Erase. Why is that drawing? Oh, because I've changed the background color. So like if this were open, in a roguelike, you want to exactly determine whether or not you can see this square. And then you want to exactly determine or not if you can see this square. In this kind of render that System Shock is, you definitely can see this square, right? And the roguelike and System Shock agree on that. The System Shock one might not bother trying to figure out whether you can see this square or not. It might just say, oh, once you can see up this way, I'll just let you see up all that way. It's not correct, but it doesn't have to be correct. In a roguelike, it determines whether you can see the square at all or not. In System Shock, if you draw the square incorrectly, it'll get overdrawn by this wall. So it's a performance trade-off. Do you do the work to figure out whether you can see it or not correctly or not? And I don't know if System Shock does or not. You have to remember System Shock is complicated by the fact that all these things have heights. So, you know, from a side view, you can actually have, you know, a floor and a ceiling in this tile, and then the next tile is like this, and you can see through them, through that connection. But on this side, the floor and the ceiling are like that, and you can't see through them. So you have to be checking the heights as well. So it's all more complicated. So I assume that clip tile is doing something like that determination of whether you can actually see along the stuff. But I'm not positive. But that would be like move out along left vector versus move out along right vector, because if the view angle is if the view is like this, well, let's do it actually here. We can do this one. Let me let's see, white. If the view is something like this, and think about it from the point of view of the camera, not from the point of view of the map. So the camera is looking left, so the camera is looking west. So then left means downwards and right means upwards. So you can imagine that it's a very natural algorithm to say, check if I can see this. Okay, if I can see that, check if I can see this. Okay, now check if I can see that, or that kind of thing. I don't know. Or maybe it's because you want to propagate information that way, but you also want to propagate information that way and that way, right? So it's possible. I don't know. I'm not going to dive into it in too much more detail, but that would be what I would guess is going on in this. Oh, I labeled. There are a few C++ files. I think it's in the physics engine. Have you heard of the Genesis 3D engine? Have we not talked about this before? I think I don't have it anymore, but I might. Let's see, is there anything here that talks about no, maybe not. Let me check somewhere to do. Let me turn this off just in case there's confidential info in any of these things. Tasks is empty. Timeline. Yeah, okay. So yeah, there's nothing in these files that's useful for you to see for this discussion, but because I wanted to see if there was something that was sort of proofy. But I guess I'll show you this one file because it does have the word Genesis 3D in it. Which one was that? Is that this one? No, it's this. We'll just scroll down. Okay, so here we go. So in 2005, no, it's fine to derail because this is just random stuff. So in 2005, I think worked on this thing called Apollo. I was contracted by a guy named David Stafford, who hopefully Abner has heard of, but maybe not. I don't know what his involvement would have been at the time you were doing it. We had a contract for Japanese company do a 3D engine, and we started with Genesis 3D. I did not know Charles Bloom in that era, though. I mean, I had worked with him at Indie Game Jam, but I didn't know him very well and didn't know his involvement in Genesis 3D. the but it was all hardware accelerated, and I guess the Genesis 3D at the time that we had it was not hardware accelerated. So we were doing basically a brand new runtime and just using the Genesis 3D world editor to do the editing, the world editing and stuff. So yeah, like I didn't ever know anything about Genesis 3D or work with it in any way other than that I got this contracting job, and suddenly had to work very heavily with Genesis 3D. So yeah, that's why I dove into it that as deep as I did, because it was that level of relevance for you, if not for the rest of the audience. All right, so we're stepping through. We were trying to determine what FR clip was, and I think that's a reasonable description. And while we were doing that, we got to cone. So now, next alphabetically after FR clip, it's FR compile. Various clippers for terrain encode. That's the same thing we just. Oh, it just freaking. What? What is this even doing? It's so this is clipping. Map pointer gets from the map that map pointer, and then it's going to walk through that. So it's walking through them and X and walking through them, and it's just clearing bits. Why it's called compile, who knows? Pipe resize. I need to find out what that means. I assume that's going to be an FR pipe. Oh, hey, look, we're right on it. When size changes, does the size of the map ever change? Weird. Weird. I don't know what any of these things could be for. I guess this is to handle the map resizing. I thought the map was a fixed size. I don't understand. Maybe it's not a fixed size. Is this full map get XY? It's just off the bottom. Let me move it up if it is. Okay. Rep full map get XY. Map plus X plus Y FM X shift. Oh, no, I. So we need to look at map.h. Maybe it's because the editor. Maybe we did have different sized maps. I didn't think we did, but maybe we did. Maybe it's an if def and it's just always fixed. Old map. Full map. That's why it's an FMP. What was I looking for? X shift. Oh, I didn't need to look at this. I just wanted to find. Oh, right. It's two definitions. I want to see which one it was. X shift. What? If map resizing. Okay. Maybe this is an editor thing. Yeah, it's only if def. It's never set. So the map is not resizable. It is hard-coded. But maybe in the editor build, maybe you could resize the map in the editor build, and they were using that before they decided what the final size would be, and then nailed the final size down and made it constants to make everything a little faster. Is it just me, or is this having very low? Potentially just you. Compared to ads. Oh, ads. Yeah, I mean, it's a different mic. I'm not being very disciplined about it. The level seems decent, but obviously if I look away, it's not very good. So, you know, whatever. And depends how loud I am. All right, so that is constant. So really, this thing is just dealing with resizes that never happen, I believe. Is it compil? Yeah. 8-letter names. All right. Back to FR. What? Oh, I'm in the H's. FR main. Have we done FR main? We did FR main. FR obj. Let's check OSLU quick to see if it's object related or not. Object slew system controllers, prototype vars, but why FR? Oh, it is part of the renderer. What would the slew system mean? What? 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 Why is this in the renderer? I don't think it's part of the renderer. I think it's part of the objects interacting with the terrain. Oh, so again, I should clarify, terrain is just what Looking Glass called the world, the static, immobile world. You know, so in an outdoor game, it's, you know, like a height field or something like that. Terrain is the natural word for it, but we use that in the indoor setting as the environment. So I think this is just having objects deal with sloped floors or something like that, probably. There's FR though. FR obj slew list. Oops, no list. Obj. No, it's just updating the object's positions. Weird code. It's grabbing one of the, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, it's something to do with objects on slopes, I think. Right, because the whole thing is the System Shock is a grid-based terrain. You know, like that seems really unfamiliar in the modern Unreal, Unity kind of world. But back then it was pretty common. The first Tomb Raider game is a grid, very obviously on a grid. I'm trying to think of other old games. Wolfenstein 3D, it's obviously on a grid. And so we had Ultima Underworld. The Looking Glass did Ultima Underworld, which was before Wolfenstein 3D, which was on a grid, and had sloped floors, flat walls. I think it had 45-degree angled walls cutting halfway through the tile, and it had a fixed ceiling that was, you couldn't change the height of the ceiling. So you have rooms get smaller, shorter, or taller strictly based on the floor height. And so then in System Shock, it's just an extension of the Underworld ideas. So there were more tile types. There were different angles of sloped floors, more than Underworld had. You could have the ceiling sloped. It might have been correlated. It might be that you could only slope the floor and the ceiling and that was all the tile could do. It couldn't do anything else special. But then there were tiles that like had split angles or some other things. And so code has to exist to then deal with that. So when you render the code, you need to figure out where those polygons effectively are and draw them. You don't ever store them as polygons. You just store them as this map. And so when objects need to move around in the world, they need to move along those slopes. So somewhere in the code has to handle the idea that, hey, this object needs to know what this tile allows it to do. And so that might be what this FRO slew is. But it seems like it is not rendering stuff, so we're fine. We just ignore it for now, for this thing. So we go back to for our object. So FDD M pointer is a map pointer to the current thing that we're looking at. Then we go through all the objects for all the objects that are in that thing. If we haven't already drawn that object, we do facelet obj. This is a facelet parse obj. There's another parse obj. And then we set it. So let's see what facelet obj does. It's not in this file. God, I'm glad I switched microphones. That would have been so annoying. Oops, wrong window, sorry. Oh wait, we don't have header files. We don't have the externs are not in header files, or not always. So it's in face obj. So find out what a face obj is. No title info. Don't put it. So will I set up facelet obj? Don't know. Hard to say. Let's look at how it's used. Who calls it? It's in here somewhere. Facelet obj. Oh, right. That was why I was doing this. See who calls facelet parse obj, so we can see if we can figure out what the context is for this. Okay, that's part of the terrain. So the terrain is going to handle all the different terrain types, how to render them, and it's going to trigger rendering the objects. That would be my expectation here. So it's just going to walk along those spans that we saw before. Oh, it has to do lighting. Yeah. Obj do light, so it's going to be communicating on the terrain, and the terrain is also going to probably, oh, maybe not. It just calls FR do light. Oh, so this is an external function for the object system to call to ask to get back info from the renderer. Cyberspace, that's what CSpace is. Render 3D walls. I guess find who calls render 3D walls. One of these. Oh, right. These are all installable functions because cyberspace rendering renders everything differently. So he did that by having these all be function calls that are installable, and you switch depending on whether you're in cyberspace or not, or something. So I need FR render walls. Oh, there's FR parse obj right there. So the tfunc version and a different and a render parse obj version. This is called by terrain frame start. This is set by tfunc grab start. What's a tfunc? Tfunc support. Is tfunc support enabled? TF direct. It is. Find TF direct, if def TF direct. This is a direct render tfunc connection. We don't call accumulate and then send facelets, we just send as we go. By calling the TF util stuff, namely facelet solve and so on. Thus we never build 3D surfaces, just distance nodes. So this is the thing I was talking about, where you move the points around in 3D directly. Yeah, I'm just viewing it in VC6 so that it uses my normal font and so that you get the comment coloring, syntax highlight. I think this is what I was talking about with the 3D, trying to optimize the 3D computations because it knows everything that's grid-based. So normally what you would do is you'd build this four vertex polygon, you compute the coordinates in world space, and then you transform them all with matrix multiplies, which requires 9 multiplies for each point. So you'd have to do 36 multiplies. And I believe what this code is doing is saying, I know that they are aligned on this grid, most of them, except when they're weird slope ones. If it generates a midpoint or something. So I know if I compute the final, if I compute one corner of that polygon and run that through to the camera space, do the 9 multiply 9. Yeah, 9. You do the 9 multiplies. I'm just ignoring the adds to keep it simple. Do the 9 multiplies to compute where that thing is in camera space. Then I have the next point I know is along the x-axis in world space. And instead of generating that point, which is only going to differ by one value in the thing, and doing a full 3x3 matrix multiply to compute it, I can know that I'm moving by the unit 100 relative to this point. So I can multiply the 100 into the matrix and add that to the result from that other point. That's the same math. But multiplying the 100 matrix in is really simple because the zeros cancel things out, and it results in only actually needing to do 3 multiplies, or potentially even 0 multiplies because I'm multiplying by 1. And so I can just, but for like vertical heights, they're variable, and so you actually have to multiply. So I think what that maybe lets you do is 9 multiplies for one point, 3 multiplies to move this way, or 0 multiplies to move this way, 3 multiplies to move vertically, and 0 to move back, and that's 12. So you can only do 12 multiplies, which is a third. 27. It's 9 times 4 is 36. So yeah, so it's a third. 12 multiplies. And if you can actually share that with other walls in here, you can actually compute that entire thing in only 6 multiplies or even fewer. So I believe that is what this whole TF direct system is. And since it's not using facelets, maybe it doesn't call the facelet function that we were looking at for the objects. Did we finish objects, or are we still trying to figure out objects? Is that what we're currently in the middle of pushing? Yeah, I think it is. So this was calling objects somewhere. Tfunc. So this is part of the tfunc calls. It still calls facelet parseobj. So that's fr parseobj. Okay, so here we go. FR draw tile. So we finally decided, here's the tile, we're ready to draw it, we're going to draw it. So it deciphers what the heights are of the 4 corners, except there's more than 4 corners. So, it's the height of the floor and the ceiling, and then some special parameterized things that allow different tile shapes. It just stores the heights of those, does this stuff. If it's cyberspace, it has to do something special. Some kind of flag. Oh no, it's not a flag, it's a mask to extract a number, which is figuring out the 6 points so it wants to draw maybe or something. I'm not positive. Draws the floor, draws the ceiling, draws objects. I guess this is drawing walls. So maybe it's drawing up to 6 walls. That would make sense. I count from wall bits, wall int, and this is actually wall count. So probably that is just drawing walls, and it's this unrolled loop for whatever reason. And then draws the floor, draws the ceiling, draws the objects. Okay, so fr parseobj, which we saw was being set to facelet obj, is the entry point for that. So facelet obj calls facelet parseobj calls facelet obj, which we tried to look at, and then we were confused. I was confused about what that was for. What was that in? Oh, it's right here. Fr obj. no, that's what calls it face obj, right? Which we looked at. I don't remember what we found there. I was just confused. I was like, what is this doing? Facelet obj. Okay, so there are a bunch of different types of obj. They can be flat poly, anim poly, text poly, bitmap, or no obj. All of those presumably draw as a single polygon. That's why they're a common case. The bitmap turns to face you, but a flat poly is probably flat in the world polygon, maybe like a door or something. Although the doors... Hey, Doug, this is where I figured you'd put the special case renderer stuff. I don't know whether you think this is a little too hardwired. So obviously somebody else wrote this initially, but we don't have a log. So here's just how to render all these different things. They call get model data to get a bitmap. Null, so we don't load a bitmap. Face parm cube. Yeah, I don't really know. Like, I know catwalk and bridge are clearly just probably single polygons that are transparent or something. I don't know how it deals with an object. Maybe there aren't. Are there? Yeah, there are 3D objects that are actual things. I guess that's the get object model data. No, that just gets a bitmap. I don't know where it deals with the actual polygon objects. Where does it draw it too? I didn't see it draw it. Facelet obj. Yeah, the use of globals, I commented earlier on the stream about one example is it means that a function at a high level passing data to a function much further down doesn't need to pass it through all the intervening levels, which when if you're making a change is a big deal. But another reason sometimes we use globals is because on x86, unlike a lot of RISC machines, the instruction set can actually express, well, was this true in the... I guess this wasn't true in the... I don't know if it's true in the 16-bit days, but this game was a 30-bit, 2-bit flat mode DOS4GW app. The instruction set could express a 32-bit constant as an addressing thing. So a single instruction can say, access this variable that's at a global memory location. So you don't need to first load it into a register and or keep a pointer to like if you put everything in structs and pass pointers around to them, those will actually take up more registers. Like because you have to pass around these pointers to the structs unless the structs are global. So there was actually in that era some conscious use of putting things in globals because you know that actually helps performance. But I can't say for any specific case here what the reason was. Like the reason why all these things are passing around all of the state as globals, whether that's seen as that kind of optimization. I mean, it's also an optimization in the sense of not passing the data around. Like you don't have to push things on the stack and pop them off the stack. You're saving a little bit of that. But mainly I was thinking about the register usage there, which they don't have to be put in registers. They can just live on the stack. But you have to keep shuffling them around the stack and pushing them down to the next ones. Whereas if they just work as globals, why not just use them as globals? So they're effectively global state. Is the other thing to think about is that like if you have a singleton kind of thing, if you were like we have a renderer object and it keeps all of its state in the renderer object, but you're only ever going to have one of them, then there's what's Rob? I don't even remember a Rob in the credits. System Shock Moby Games. Who am I not thinking of? Oh, Zemo. It's Zemo, right? Yeah, okay. I'm just so used to him going by his handle Rob Perrier. Right, so the problem I was having is this doesn't seem to actually render. Was that where I was? I never looked at what faceparm cube is. Setup cube face. I guess it's just, its job is to get you RV. Probably clip codes or something. Clip codes for whether a given face would be visible, unless this is just setting some kind of global state. It could be defining a global state somewhere. Solve aligned face. There. TF direct. Terrain function direct, maybe? I forgot what I was looking for. Solve aligned face. Solve 2D case. Stair check. Five vertices must be in the face list. Box stands are used in the first pass and then split up. Pre-built normal params set somehow. Point list is clockwise. So I guess this is generating the points. It's generating a normal. It's returning a point. No, it's returning not a point, it's returning a single value, a fixed point value. Return distance. Is this just a distance thing? Attenuation? Bull. It's a bull, though. In range. I guess it's solving whether it's visible or not. Like, you need the normal to check if it's back facing, maybe? I don't know. Not sure. But it clearly doesn't draw. So it's done a bunch of work to decide if it's visible or something. TF imp bull. And then down here, if it's visible. Terrain object collide. Wait, am I looking at that one function now? That seems like this is physics stuff. Yeah. Okay, that just cannot be the right function. I must have traced things through wrong. I think this is for handling objects that behave like vols for physics and stuff, is what that function was. Which would make sense, face obj, right? So I was trying to figure out the rendering in frtar. It's calling objects. So this one is calling fr parse obj in drawTile though. So let's look again. Parse obj. Render parse obj. Fr tfunc grab start. Set up the physics face it. So this one, tfunc. Remember I was saying the tfunc had that whole thing about the direct support. Maybe that isn't that. Maybe tfunc is only for physics. tf direct, that was what that was. No, this says it's a direct render. So I think that there's just some deception that tf doesn't mean that. tf just means terrain function, and I was fooled by saying tf direct there. So, okay, so that answers that question. Fr parse obj. Set to render parse obj for rendering. And it's set to fr tfunc obj, not for tf direct. See, it's inside tfunc support, which I thought was not actually tf support, but was tf direct. That was the first macro I saw that it was inside. Yeah, if-def tf direct, not if-def tfunc support. Well, we can search for that just to make sure. Maybe I'm missing a... No, tfunc support is never in here. So that is actually supposed to be tf direct. So I don't make that mistake again in the future. I don't want to change the code at all, but I'll make that kind of correction where that is so misleading. Okay, so I had assumed, since tf direct seemed to be a direct renderer connection, that this thing that set the function pointers to fr tfunc obj for parse obj, but maybe because it's parse, that's actually a different meaning. No, but we saw the other one was render parse. Fr tfunc grab start. Fr setup. Actually, it's done in here multiple places. Tfunc grab start. Train frame end calls grab start, which switches it to physics mode after you've finished rendering. So all of these are for rendering, I mean for physics, not for rendering. So it can't be that thing I was talking about the points being updated to avoid the transformation, because in physics you would just use world space. You wouldn't need any of that stuff. So I don't know what it's actually doing then. Solve. Why do they call it solve? I don't know. So parse obj was being set to render parse obj. So render parse obj. It's probably back in the object thing, so we can finally resolve this. Render parse obj. This is actually what gets called. The other thing gets called for physics. This is what gets called for rendering. If we're not in rend test, we look through all the things, we find them, we mark that we've set it, and if we are showing it, we call sort show obj, which probably puts it in a list, and then we sort all the ones that are in the same tile. But then if that were true, we would at the end have to, render sorted obs. Right, there we go. So oh, that's external. So it should just be keeping like a linked list in sorted order or something. game sort. So we just add it to a list and then we sort it, probably. Partition sort section, and then we show them. Oh, I've been doing this for 3 hours. I might want to stop soon. We're chatting a little bit. Let me look back at it. Nope. Okay. So that all makes sense. Does game sort get used for anything else? Like, this seems like a lot of work just to handle multiple objects in a single. We said return to Zork reference. I scrolled away from it very fast, so I'll put it back up for a second. This seems like a lot of code just to sort the objects in a single grid cell. This just is going to work. Max sorted refs, 64. Yeah, up to 64 objects in a single grid cell. So you score objects. Oh, right, but you had these special things, like you had a force bridge or whatever. So you want to draw all the objects below the force bridge and all the objects above the force bridge separately and draw the force bridge in between them. Whereas other things you want to depth sort. So sure, yeah, it's going to be... So then you partition sort because you partitioned them into 2 partitions. And so you sort each section separately. So yeah, that must be what that stuff is. So there you go. That's game sort. Put these longer notes in so that I don't have to remember all that stuff for next time when I go into more detail. I haven't updated this list. Cone fr compile game sort. All right, so now we can go back to the previous function, frobj. So render parse obj goes through all the objects, calls render sorted objects. Render sorted objects is in game sort, and it calls show obj or something like that, which is not in this function. Okay, so frobj. We don't know where. And we don't know what the other thing is that's actually doing the draw. So it was in game sort that it called show obj or something like that. Yep. So then we search for show obj. Oh, we've sort show obj. It is back in game obj. I didn't. Oh no, it's in game obj, not in fr. Game obj. So yeah, this must have been like an older, had a different rendering system or something, or who knows. So show obj is just, it's going to do all the 3D renderings. Show obj. If you're in cyberspace, you do something different. Else. Did it return? Yeah, if you were in cyberspace and you did something different, you already returned. So So then you get to here. If it's just a bitmap, you draw the bitmap. Ice, ice, baby. Then you draw ice. I believe that would be for, I don't know. The cyberspace has ice in the sense of the Neuromancer sense of the defensive stuff, but, or is ice your weapon? I think it's the defensive stuff. Get model data, critter. So that's, remember I said they were called critters. And multi-view is probably a multi-view bitmap that you have to use a different bitmap for it. So like here's an example of stuff being hard-coded for a game. Diego triple. Diego is the sub-boss. So he's got some special thing. I guess it's if he's teleporting, maybe, because I see tele-BM bits. He teleports away when you damage him enough, so maybe that's a hack here to draw that. I don't know what the triple stuff is, but there's the invisible creatures that are translucent. The voxel objects for cyberspace. Textured polys. Doors. Texture poly. Anim poly. Float poly. So yeah, this should just, this should just be 3D rendering of all different object types, as you would expect. Yep, game object. Triple identifier is a complex identifier consisting of class, subclass, and type information. Oh, okay. Yeah. i.e. the globally unique ID of an object type. Yeah. An object type. It's like a terrible, like, I would just never call it that way. Like, but I know what you mean. But yeah, like, it's the full class identifier in some sense, but class is not the right word. Type identifier, which is what you were saying, an object type. But yeah. So yeah, sorry, for people who are, well, you on Twitch, you can, on Twitch archive, you'll still see the chat, but yeah, so the triple is just the combination of the class, the subclass. So class is the thing that chooses which array gets used for, you can see it here. If the class is big stuff, it uses the obs big stuff array. So class is what determines which array contains your extra data. Subclass is just sub information of that. Like maybe your class is critter, and then your subclass is which kind of critter are you? Are you a mutant? Are you a, well, there are different kinds of mutants, but are you a robot of this? Are you a Diego's, you know, etc. It might actually be that they even have that the subclass is robot and mutant, and then there's this further third type thing. I don't know for sure. So that would mean that the switch should do, yes, so you can see the switch does ID to trip. So it converts an object ID to the triple encoding which thing it is. That's all going to be map note. That's all going to be macro craziness to encode that stuff, to repack it into a 32-bit number or something. Just to simplify this kind of logic. But anyway, so we trace this thing down to its endpoint, the game object thing, which had started with fr obj. So how many FRs are left? I might stop here since I'm getting a little tired, although I'm not, it's not like I'm going to bed. And then was the FRO slew we decided was not rendering, right? And the FR pipe we've already documented. No, we haven't, but we've looked at it. But it's not actually documented. FR points was that point stuff. FR setup we've looked at. FR tables, there's probably tables about the tile types. And FR tear we've looked at, but we haven't documented. And FR util and FR utils, but So, oh, full AMAP. That's got to be the full screen auto map. Yeah. Okay. So, yep. So this wasn't quite accurate. Auto map, interactive processing, and then this one is full AMAP. Full AMAP.c, full screen, auto map, main loop. Right, this will be a main loop, presumably. It doesn't actually have a loop. Oh, because that was in AMAP loop. Yeah, yeah. So this is so this one is still full screen, because you would never go into that loop unless it was full screen. Processing for full screen auto map setup and interfacing. Yes, we'll call that. I never worked on the game proper stuff of any of Looking Glass's RPGs. I didn't work on Underworld. I didn't work on the game side of System Shock. I just did the mini games. So like the triple stuff is actually not familiar to me, because I don't think we did that in Terra Nova. I think we might have only had class and subclass. And then Thief worked in a totally different way. So some of those ideas are things I never actually got exposed to at the time. And then let's update this. Frobj and GameObj. And I should alphabetize these so I can check that list. So yeah, I'm going to stop there. I'll check this in. I'll probably work on it more without bothering to stream. But who knows? I could stream. Like I said, I don't know how valuable this is to stream. More documentation. Let me abort this. Why are 3 files? Oh, there was the one file that I changed the comment. What was the change to the other file? So that one's the one that was intentional. Is there an unintentional change to this other file? Trigger. Oh, I like changed the spacing. Yeah, let me just fix that. There's no point in changing the spacing. More documentation for game file. And let's check that I didn't screw up any of the markdown. A lot of forks of that. How do I get back to me? It's probably just fastest to type it. Oh, no, I want to do this. This will get me to the right place. Oh, I haven't changed this to Metapad readme. This will source code structure. That should link me directly to it. Yep, there we go. Game sort. Yes, thank you. Game. Okay, good. It wasn't in a link, so I won't bother checking that in right now. It'll get pushed in next time since it's just a typo. Since people might link to this, I'm actually let me This is back at the root one. Okay, that one's fine. We have to load shockmat game. And we want to say, oh, there's this. This readme is in progress. I have not characterized all of the files yet. And then we want to go to libraries. None of these have been done. What did I write before? Documentation is in progress. None of these subdirectories, none of the subdirectories named below have a documentation yet. Seems reasonable. Check if I had any other corrections. So I will check in that other correction because I've got to commit all of this. Clarify it's in progress. In progress or in progress? It's in progress. It's in progress. I think it's hyphenated. You can definitely use it without hyphens, but it feels like in that circumstance it ought to be. Maybe not. Maybe that's just me being weird. Well, it doesn't matter. I checked it in. I was supposed to be looking up how to spell it without checking it in, but I obviously did check it in. What's the difference between the N and R drives? I don't remember the details. The way we did our code was, but I can't name N versus R or whatever, but the way we did our code was there were servers on the network that had the most current version of all the files. And then if you wanted to change something, you checked it out into your local C drive and made changes there. And then when you checked it back into the version control system, it went up onto that network spot automatically and was deleted from your local code. So then when you were building, the build system would look in your local directory first and then onto the network drives. And the reason we did all that is because then the network servers had more RAM and could just keep all of the source code in memory all the time. And so it was actually faster to load, for the compiler to load the source code from the server than for it to load it from disk locally. Remember, we were in DOS, so this so like I don't remember were there disk caches. Maybe there weren't even disk caches, so it was really going to disk every time you asked for a file or something. That's what it was like when I was working maybe a couple years after Shock shipped. We may have used the system slightly differently at the time of Shock. I don't remember. But anyway, so then the N and R drive stuff probably had something to do with the game was on one drive and the shared libraries were on another drive or something like that. But I honestly don't remember. Any other questions? I should have fixed the game. See, let's push it. It's that right there. Yep. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 out of 112 files. So we've done what did I say? 21 out of 112. So I can't do that in my head. That's a too weird the between thing. So just under 20%. Yeah. So I've done just under 20% of this very simple characterization of the things. Like I said, I'd like to drill down further and actually, you know, you can imagine I can just expand this. These things that are a list could become a sublist, and I can say what all the functionality of the things is. And I could also move these onto multiple pages and split them up hierarchically that way if it's too gross for them to be in this one flat thing. It might be nice to actually have an interface that allows collapsing so that you can, so it's a tree view that you collapse to see what you're doing. I don't know how to do that. Like anything like that, I have to move off of GitHub and start hosting this locally. So I don't know how far down that path I want to go, because that starts being a lot more work. Very interesting, much more so than you initially thought. I don't think so. I don't think you get that much value out of watching the stream versus reading through this stuff. You get to see what it takes for me to figure out for sure, right? Because one of the things is I can look at a file and go, oh, this is the object writer, and just write that. And I'm going into it a little more depth to make sure I understand. And so some of them got very squirrely because I got faked out a little bit. Like GameObj, actually I should talk, not GameObj, FRObj. This is not quite correct because, so these links are all wrong. Which they were all made by cut and pasting from the other one. Did I break my cut and paste at some point? Maybe I did that wrong. I'll go fix that. That's the correct link. What do I have? Oh, I did this switch over. I switched it to have the explicit /nothings because that's supposed to work in HTTP, right? That's supposed to be valid HTTP notation, always. Literally always. I thought that was just always valid. Oh, it's relative to, no, it should be relative to, no, it's you can't use just the name of the file because that's not how GitHub is structured. It's called tree when you're looking at the tree, and when you click through to a file, it's called blob. They made that not work. So that should work now. Yes. So was the only difference? Is there no other difference? This doesn't work. This works. Yeah, that's exactly correct. How can that not work? I thought that always works. Does HTTPS forbid it? Does Markdown not handle it? Oh, GitHub Markdown can handle that, so they might be rewriting these things. Oh. Interesting. Yes, I was just thinking it was straight Markdown, but of course it could be doing its own rewrite. Let's try a few. Yeah, I should have realized that, yes, they want that stuff to work, so they'll make that work. Yep, yeah, they magic translate. Okay, so I can make, so that, I was complaining about how long these URLs were, and so yeah, I can just get rid of that. So we just do that, replace with nothing. Here's one where I typoed it or something anyway, the lowercase, I don't know what. Here's a bunch of other ones that are different. I wonder what I changed here. Okay, that probably fixes it. Thank you for pointing that out. In hindsight, yeah, of course it would do that. because they try to do this stuff right. So I should have figured that they would try to do that right. I just thought it was Markdown, right? I just didn't think about. I didn't really think about the full flow. I just thought of each system in isolation. Fix all the URLs. Oh, I have to push. Dun, 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 dun. Down, down, down. Yep, there we go. All right, well, thanks for hanging with me. Let's see, do we have any more questions? It doesn't look like we did. I said tree instead of blob. Okay, I somehow screwed up my cut and paste. So yeah, I'll probably do this again. If people like just having me on chattering in the background or whatever, I can probably stream again. There's probably no reason not to. I like to fix my audio situation properly instead of having this hack. So I might not stream until I get the audio fixed properly, even if I do some further updating. On the other hand, maybe because people are interested in the rendering, maybe doing the rendering in stream is worth it. So if I do more work, I won't touch the rendering stuff. But so yeah, I may make some progress on this off stream. I don't know. We'll have to see how everything goes. And that's about it. In general, for people who would like to see me doing programming streams, it's just hard to say when there's going to be stuff to do, what stuff I'm working on. I'm working on a game right now that I don't want to stream. I could stream some of it, but I just don't want the distraction. I'm trying to stay focused on it when I'm working on it. And, I just haven't worked on any FTP libraries or anything like that. That was why I did OBBG, was so that I would have something to stream. That was really the reason OBBG existed, was to have something to talk about and to do on stream. So, yeah, I just don't know. There may be more programming streams someday. It's just a question of when there's something worth streaming. Not worth streaming, something to stream. If you set aside the game that I don't want to stream, how much other programming do I do? So this project, I don't know how deep I'm going to go with it, as I've said before. So we'll see. I certainly hope to stick with it long enough to get every single file documented. I don't know if the libraries are going to bore me trying to do that. But at least in the game, get all the files documented. And it might be nice, as I've said, it would be interesting to go into it deeper and document the functions and start being explicit about what the cross-references between things are. I did that a little bit here with that these things call these other things, but nothing's hot-linked or anything. And then, the further point would be to write sort of essay-ish, or structured posts that actually describe certain systems and how they all interact. And I don't know if I would ever get to that far down. And then there's further you can go beyond that, which is to go through all the code and document everything in the code, sort of literate programming style or something. Did I work on the new Thief or just Thief 2? I did not work on the new Thief. I worked on Thief 1. I didn't exactly work on Thief 2, but it still used the Thief 1 engine. Let's see. What was I saying? Oh yeah, and so you could go deeper and sort of do a literate programming thing and document stuff. And if I, for some reason, decide to keep working on System Shock Source for so many hours that that's all that's left to do, then yeah, that's what would happen. But I have no idea that I'm going to be interested in working on it for that long. It's interesting to me because it is that aspect of it is interesting because commenting code is a fraught since code changes, and so even if you put accurate comments in, they become stale. But since this code is all frozen, it is the game that it was, then any comments we make in hindsight about it can be stick with the frozen code and always be correct. So it's kind of interesting to do. Of course, the purpose of adding that comment is now different. It's not to help you do maintenance in the future. The purpose of it is just to help people understand the code base, which is why I was saying sort of a literate style. This is not the greatest project for literate programming. You know, something like LCC is a little more carefully thought through to be explainable that way, a little bit less hackery and stuff. So you know, the value there is maybe questionable. System Shock is also basically my favorite game. It's a little weird because I worked on it, so it's hard to be objective, but because I was so tangential to working on it, I'm fairly confident about that. And so I don't normally say that because I worked on it. Like, I try to avoid saying that that's my favorite game ever because it's weird and I pick something else. But if I'm not having to do this on demand for someone else to asking what's your favorite game, if I'm just like, yeah, like that seemed like that was my favorite game back then, or would have been my favorite game if I hadn't been involved in any way on it. And so I think that's part of why I'm interested in documenting, is because I think it's an important game and a valuable game. So yeah, I'm not down on Thief, like which I worked on substantially. It's amazing. Thief is an amazing exploration of a whole new realm of like this whole stealth idea and stuff. But I liked Ultima Underworld. I liked those classic Looking Glass RPGs, and System Shock was sort of the peak of that style of RPG, that Looking Glass style RPG, because the Thief stuff moved away from the RPG elements. System Shock 2 moved back towards them, but I don't actually like System Shock 2 very much. I don't like the way in which it integrated that stuff. It doesn't appeal to me in the same way it did it felt a little more grognardy RPG-ish with like the tech trees and stuff like that, whereas System Shock is much more about immersivity. I mean, System Shock 2 is trying to be immersive, but it just has all these other systems that kind of conflict with that. For me, again, nothing wrong with you guys, anybody out there who thinks System Shock 2 is a better game than System Shock 1. That's absolutely fine. I have no criticism of that position. But for me, like, System Shock 2 just didn't really work. And System Shock 1 worked amazingly well for me. So that's why it's on the table that things could go that far. But, you know, don't get your hopes up. I will probably get bored of working on System Shock Source eventually. But maybe I'll just try to dole it out slowly so I don't get bored, rather than try to crank on it on these long sessions like today, the 3-hour session, and maybe I should only do an hour a day, or not a day, an hour a week or something like that, you know, and in a year have it pretty well documented. Who knows? But yeah, we'll see where it goes. All right, there were no more questions, so I'm done, and goodbye and see you later.